On a test, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 on a test.
Thank you.
We're ready? Okay. Okay. Hello, and welcome to the Board of Education meeting of October 23rd, 2024. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Natalie, could you please reiterate the executive session motion?
Yes. We met to discuss the employment history of a particular person.
Okay. Okay. Thank you all for being here tonight. I'll keep my remarks brief so we can get started. Tonight we have capital markets advisors with us to discuss funding options for the facilities updates we are considering. Their focus will be on providing options that maximize financing terms and aid while also managing the impact on our taxes. A reminder on next steps with facilities updates. The architects will further refine the projects that they propose. The board will then prioritize through a transparent process, and we will seek public feedback on that prioritization. Also, believe it or not, we will kick off the 2025-2026 budget season tonight. Jim will review the timeline with us, and the board can talk about some of the expectations we have for this upcoming budget cycle. And now I'd just like to briefly touch on the stormwater project at Julian's Playground and give the board a chance to comment if they'd like. We've determined that it's best to move away from appealing the eminent domain and focus on the next step, the valuation process. The school district still believes the village should own the blacktop and tennis courts. However, the village is firm in its position to take easements for those areas and to only purchase the property that includes the pumps, restroom, and housing structure. While we could have pursued an appeal and may have been successful in some regard, it would not change the ultimate outcome of the village taking easements instead of fully owning the land for the project or perhaps the park in its entirety. This decision aims to limit legal costs, focus our resources on education where they belong, and prioritize the next step, the valuation process. So what happens now? The Village of Pelham will file with the State Supreme Court to take ownership of the land for the pump house and bathroom, as well as take subterranean easements for the blacktop and tennis court, and an above-ground access easement. The village will be required to pay just and fair compensation based on the highest and best use of the property under permissible zoning. If the district does not agree with the payment offered, it may seek additional compensation through the State Supreme Court. I also want to point out that because the school district will own the property that the project is on, at least part of it, it will require permitting from the State Education Department. We have confirmed this twice with the State Education Department. Finally, I wish the village much success in addressing the flooding issues and alleviating the suffering it causes. Along with that, I'll state it's important for us to begin a partnership built on mutual respect, collaboration, and accountability. I remain hopeful that we can at least start to build a more cooperative relationship during the valuation phase of this legal proceeding. Okay. Anybody?
I'll say something.
Okay.
Jackie, you were very diplomatic, as always. I may be a little bit more direct. So I received a few emails in the last couple of days from people either thanking me or scolding me for the Board of Ed's reversal in our position on this issue. And I just want to be very clear about this. We didn't reverse our position. Rather, our legal counsel advised us that pursuing an appeal in court would be completely futile, and we have no intention of squandering taxpayer dollars on a costly legal battle that we're almost certainly going to lose. And that should not be misinterpreted that we suddenly agree with the village's actions, specifically their decision to seize an easement through eminent domain. I'll reiterate my belief, and I think this is shared by my colleagues on the board, but if you disagree, please do so, that the village should own the land under which they are placing this massive infrastructure, which is going to be there forever. But they don't want to own the land because, one, they don't want to pay for it up front, and two, I imagine they don't want to manage it either. Owning land comes with costs, maintenance, general upkeep, liability, which the village is avoiding by using land for their project that they don't own. And the village, Mayor Mullen, would prefer to complete the project on land that remains the school district's responsibility regardless of the impact, the long-term impact on us. So I'm sorry to say this, but the claim that we are, from the village, that we are one community, I find that a little bit unconvincing when the approach is solely focused on minimizing the cost of the village, even at the district's expense. So I too wish the village every success with the project. I hope it's a success, but I firmly believe they should own and manage the land under which these tanks are being installed.
Mine's short, and it's to say I agree with everything that you just said. Well, thank you.
Thanks.
Maybe I'm living in a cloud. I probably still have hope that the village will do the right thing and own the land that they want to build this project on. I think is fair. They did something that I feel was not nice to a community member, which is the school district, which is the district that takes care of all the children in this community. Regardless of whether you live on one side of the village or another, we are all impacted. They are all our children. They did something that they had the legal right to do, but it's just because it's legally permissible doesn't make it right. I did see this week that the mayor, Chance Mullen, did say that he is willing to pay just money for the land that he wants to own. I hope that is the true, because throughout this last year, the school board has done everything possible to make this project happen for them. We've proposed many a times how they could own this land, and they have turned all that down. And instead of continuing to negotiate with us, they decided to just go through the eminent domain process. Unfortunately, because we will own that land, we will have to go through state approval, which I only think doesn't benefit them. So I do wish that he would still reconsider and figure out a way to own the land. Maybe it goes through the eminent domain process, and at that point they'll decide that, hey, it's just better if we just take all the land versus an easement. And I do think that is the best interest for them. It is the best interest for the town, for the village, for everyone involved, for us. I really do think that's the way it's weighed. So I still feel that, them owning the land is the best way for this project to go forward. But in the interest of time and money, we do have a lot to accomplish this year. We have a new strategic plan. We have a lot to do with our facilities. And as a school board, we have to prioritize what we have to accomplish this year. So.
We're good?
I don't think I have anything to add right now. I've talked about the SED issue before, and they're going to have to pay fair value, which I think is going to be basically the same whether it's an easement or a taking in fee at this
Agreed.
point. So.
I guess I'll just add that I'm glad that we are able to move forward, and we can focus on getting fair value for the land, and then refocus our efforts on the school district and the kids and what we need to do for the upcoming year and next for planning.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you. We can move on to section 3. I'll take it, do I have a motion to approve we'll take 3.1 and 3.2, a motion to approve minutes for 2 board meetings, September 11th and September 25th?
So moved.
Second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, any abstentions? Okay. Okay, next we have capital markets online.
All right, yes, and while Rick joins us, I just want to thank Jim and Jackie Vigil for working with Rick and we've had several finance committee meetings in the recent days, recent weeks, in preparation for tonight. And I've been sharing, as I've been visiting our PTAs about the work of the board this year, the goals the board's focused on facilities and finance. September 18th, as the board knows, we had our work session on facilities, and we said at that time the next step would be to bring in our capital markets financial advisors to help us understand some financial strategies for addressing our facilities needs. So we're excited to come to tonight. And I just appreciate the preparation work that Jim and Jackie have done working with
Yes.
Rick Gansey. Jim, is there anything else you wanted to add to tee Rick up for his presentation tonight?
Just a little background, I think, would be helpful for the board and the community. So Rick Yancey is Executive Vice President and Principal of Capital Market Advisors. They've been the district's financial advisors since prior to my arrival over 8 years, just about plus 8 years ago right now. When we worked through the 2017 and the eventual 2018 bond, we had the opportunity for Rick to do something very similar to what we expect him to do here this evening, which is to really share some information with the board and to educate the board and the community on the bonding process, to kind of describe a little bit about school aid and how this entire process works. We've been fortunate, we've had 2 prior meetings with Rick with the Finance Committee over the last few weeks. So for those committee members, it may be a little bit like Groundhog Day. We're going to hear a little bit about the same things. However, I think in those conversations, we've also had an opportunity to gain a deeper understanding of the projects and kind of the school financing and the school construction process. Again, this is just one part of our process. We met with our architect a few weeks ago, and we expect to meet with our architect this week as well as we move through this process, which will also be an inclusive process, which will involve our committees. And eventually, I'm sure there'll be outreach to our community as well as prior to any final decisions to help the board make final determinations and recommendations for a vote. So I guess with that, I'll stop talking, and if I can, I'll look at the screen, and hopefully Rick can make himself available. Rick, thank you for being here this evening, and I'll stop. Thank you.
Want me to share the presentation, Jim, or does everybody have it?
Are you able to put it up, Rick?
Yep. Let me pull it up here.
Terrific.
Can you see that on your screen?
We can. Thank you.
Okay, great, thank you. Yep, thanks for having me again. It's good to be back to see the board again. You know, it's been some time, obviously, since the last capital project. You know, some of the board members might be familiar with the 2018 project, which was wildly successful. You never really have like projects that you know, become so obviously successful. Let me hold on one second.
Chris, can the volume go any higher? Yeah. Okay, thanks. We can't hear him. Wait, I think it's 7. Rick, can you hear us?
Yep, I can hear you, sorry.
We're not hearing you right now.
He's also not talking.
Oh, okay.
Can you hear me? No?
Yes.
Yes.
Trying to bring the presentation up. 1 second.
You having champagne back there? We're popping a bottle of champagne for the.
And if it's okay, we have Rick's presentation as well. We're going to push that up into
Rick,
board
it's
docs.
Chris. You had it correct the first time you had it up there. We were able to
Yeah,
see
let me,
everything.
sorry, 1 second.
We're going to push it into board docs under the item number 2. So for those who want to bring it up on their
Under item
on their
2.
computer, they'll be able to do that.
Can you see that there?
Yes.
Yes, we
Yeah.
can.
Okay, great. Sorry
Thank
about
you,
that. Yeah, I
thank
don't know
you.
what happened there. Anyway, so the 2018 project was very successful. We did the issue with the actually the historically low interest rates. The new Hutch School obviously was, very important project for the district. So, now we're on the heels of closing out that 2018 project. And districts, across the state, obviously, every 5 years or so, we think about, new projects. So what we're talking about here is nothing that's unusual with respect to other districts, especially your peer districts in Westchester County. I know you recall, I think Clarkson, Ossining, White Plains, are some like recent districts that, Katona, Croton Harmon, districts that have, currently thinking about capital projects. They're taking advantage of a drop off in what's called the local share. So we're trying to frame the discussion now in the sense that we have local share falling off in the sense that older projects are rolling off, and there's an opportunity to put on new projects as the older projects roll off. So every 5 years, districts do what's called a building condition survey. So every 5 years, the district's architects, along with the districts, will put together a master plan of, what the needs are of the district, and then we'll, decipher whether or not, what's needed as far as going forward. So what we've kind of talked about with the Finance Committee and Jim and his staff are a couple concepts, right? So when we think about state building aid, the state of New York pays school districts through building aid annually for capital projects. So with respect to your district, the lowest you could get in building aid is 10%, and the highest is 98%. So you're at 49.4%, which what that means is every 49 cents on the dollar of eligible expenses for the project is paid for by state aid. So that's very critical with respect to your project because you're able to leverage that aid to pay for some of the local share that otherwise would be paid by local taxpayers. So when we talk about a concept of maximum cost allowance, when we talk about eligible expenses that the district would otherwise pay, or the state would otherwise pay, maximum cost allowance means that the state has a cap on what would otherwise, is going to be paid by the state of New York. So they have each building that is paid for by the state has a cap on what they otherwise would pay. So that's all of your buildings have a cost allowance by which they would pay the maximum allowed for each project. So a quick kind of talk about where we are as far as local share. So the district with a really strong credit rating is fortunate in the sense that they have local share currently. Local share meaning state building aid that comes in, debt service that goes out, and that would be the term of local share that would be for the local taxpayers. So with respect to the local share, the district has a local share dropping off in 26 and 27 of about $330,000. In 2020, 30 and 31, we have a local share dropping off of roughly 2.3 million. So what does that mean? What that means is that the district has a great opportunity to think about long-range planning in the sense that they have an opportunity to put on new capital projects over the next several years without potentially increasing taxes to the local taxpayers. And the reason that is because of that local share drop-off. Districts try to maintain a local share to be rather level because of the capital tax exclusion that allows for districts to exclude the taxes by way of local share. So it's important to point out that the local share exclusion becomes important in this analysis, in the sense that the district could potentially put on another $10 million of capital project vote as soon as 2025, as well as another potential vote down in 2028 of potentially $55 million to leverage that drop off in local share. So the question really tonight is whether or not the district would think about, two propositions, $10 million and $55 million, or, one proposition all at once in the next year or so. And then the question, I guess, is, renovations versus additions. And the distinction between renovations and additions is important in the sense that with respect to renovations, there's a distinction of maximum cost allowance by aid for the state. But when you get into the territory of additions, it's a completely separate calculation that the state needs to approve upon an addition or new building because it falls under a different regulation of the state. So with respect to the $10 million in a 2025 vote, if the district decides, 2025 may be too soon, the district does have the opportunity to, allocate within the budget process, $300,000 each year to pay for capital projects on an ongoing basis until the vote comes on. The local share can be approved. So I'll pause there for any questions that might come up.
I actually have a question. You mentioned the max, for an addition, there's a max cost allowance. Is there some for renovations?
What's that?
For additions, there's a max cost allowance. How about for renovations?
Yeah, so renovations is already set. There's already a maximum cost allowance for renovations for each of your district buildings. The question on additions is there's no existing cost allowance for additions at any of the buildings. So you recall when we did the Hutch new building, the district had to apply to the state of New York SED to have building aid units assigned to that building. As of now, we have renovation cost allowances for each building, but no additions or new buildings because that would be a separate application.
So one of the things that, I would say one of the things that we talked about this morning, and certainly Jim and Rick would fill in too, or any of the folks who were there this morning, as we get further down the road with some of these projects, I think that's where looking at the building aid units and the allowable maximums will really come into play as we start to consider the scale of some of the options, and it might help us to weigh how much, where we're going to maximize, how we're going to be able to maximize those. And I know if we were to consider even a new building, we had that conversation this morning as well, is from a financing perspective, not to, get in front of anything here, but that there would be a separate approval process from the state education department because a new building does not have any building aid units assigned to it. So we'd have to go through an extra step there based on our conversations with Rick and our prior experience.
Yeah, I will say with respect to the application to the state of New York to get new building aid units assigned, we've worked with a couple districts, locally in Westchester County, and quite frankly, the process to get building aid units assigned for new buildings or additions has taken SED over a year to get those assigned. So if we're thinking about, a project to be voted on, in 2025, it's going to be very difficult, if not impossible, to get an application to the state for building aid units for an addition or a new building prior to the vote, if in 25.
And Rick, I think when we were talking this morning, one of the things that you mentioned that wasn't in your presentation now, but is relevant to this, I think, is the different time periods over which building aid gets paid out and bonding would happen for renovations. I think it's 15 years, additions 20 years, and a new building 30 years. Is that right?
Exactly, yeah. So renovation, so when we did the last capital project in, 18, the new Hutch building was aided over a 30-year period, which would also, the bond issue was also over 30 years, whereas the renovations at Prospect Hill and the high school, middle school were over a 15-year period. So those, obviously, you match up the state building aid with the debt service. So with respect to if there was a new building contemplated, there's an opportunity to stretch out that payment over 30 years, which could obviously change, the math between the $10 million and the $55 million analysis now with respect to the drop-off. Those assumptions are based on a 15-year payback of aid and debt service.
Thank you, and I think that's a very good point to make, Rick, and really what we're seeing here is kind of what we asked you to do, which was give us an understanding of kind of what the range of a project could look like with a renovation-sized project, and because we have to start somewhere. We don't know if it's going to be a renovation, an addition, something else, but then based on where our work takes us, the other part of our work then is working with Rick. Rick's got other spreadsheets that he shared with our finance committee, where he can work out what that net share will be for the expected net share for the district will be based on these projects. Again, with those updated assumptions, we were able to do some of that with some success in the 18 bond, which was helpful. But again, just as we've all talked about, we have to start somewhere, have to make some assumptions. So really this assumption and starting point brings us to that 15-year amortization level and kind of using, standard rates that we're seeing out there at the state level right now, although we've got some better credit than that, so than the average state level.
Yeah, but I think you're one of the very few districts statewide that have a AAA credit rating. So it's something certainly to be proud of. And that was reflective in, the bond issue that was done back in the 2018 vote. There's not many districts that could say that they have a AAA credit rating from S&P. So certainly something to be proud of, and certainly something that, worth to maintain over time.
Rick, can I just ask you to talk a little bit about kind of what you see across the board? You mentioned earlier about the idea of using these opportunities where debt is dropping off to borrow without it, being an incremental add to the taxpayer. So I know what we've talked about is a little bit of almost, I don't know if we've said the word tonight, but we kind of informally call it like keyholing,
Right.
Into those opportunities. What do you see other districts doing at times like that with those opportunities?
Yeah, so this is not uncommon with districts throughout the state. I think it's actually quite common that districts look, long range, not just in the next couple of years, but 5, 10, 15 years out. I think it's very critical that districts look at that, because if you have a significant drop-off like you do in the next, 5 or so years, it's important that you look to maintain that local share and bring on new projects because districts always have needs for work. So it's rather significant that you look at, where the drop-offs are and, plan accordingly. And that's how we kind of approach, all districts, that we work with, just to know like what the drop-off is and then look to plan projects accordingly. I will point out, with respect to timing, right? So one may say, geez, there's a drop-off in 26, 27, 30, 31. Why are we talking about it now? One of the key points is that by the time you vote on a project, it takes time, obviously, to get to the voters. Once it's voted on, it's another year or so between plans and specs with the architect. And then the SED review time on projects is currently 6 months. So you're talking about, a 2-year lead time between, now and when the local share would come on. So I think that's why we're talking about it now, is that do you talk about bringing on a project, for $65 million now or 10 million now, and then think about, what the next project might look like a couple years down the road?
So, just, if we take the 10 million debt that's rolling off, $330,000 annually, that's rolling off in 26, 27, the only reason not to kind of re-up that debt would, I guess, be because you wanted to reduce the tax burden on the taxpayer. But you're going to need that money eventually. Is it fair to say we're going to need that money eventually, unless we're not interested in kind of long-range facilities plans? And all you would be doing by not re-upping that debt is like kicking the can down the road and just having a more dramatic increase in taxes when you need that money, rather than kind of smoothing it out and rolling it in, if that makes sense.
I think that's a good way to describe it. Certainly, the board has the stewardship to look after the buildings, and your guidance documents are kind of that building condition survey. So you have an understanding of what our conditions of our buildings are. And then with that, and looking at the financial conditions, it's that you can then make those decisions to address the needs of the building and address those items that have been identified as part of that building condition survey.
Yeah, and Rick, you were saying, you just went through how it's common practice to do it this way, and this morning you said it was a best practice, right? That this is the one of the best ways to deal with, to deal with the future facilities needs and provide financing for it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's best practice in the sense that, according to the state of New York, this is guidelines for the state that every 5 years, the districts need to submit a building condition survey. That's state law.
Yes.
So
Ours
every
too.
district obviously has to get in that cycle of, putting together a plan of, what the needs assessment are of the district. So that sort of is your guiding factor to say, all right, this is what the needs of the district are.
Yeah, we have
but the-
work to do, yes.
The financial piece of it is how much can we support, right? So how much can we afford as the district to do going forward by way of local share, what's rolling off, how much our taxpayers could support. You're in an incredibly great position in the sense that you have a good amount of local share falling off. So you could do a good amount of work with no incremental tax increase to the taxpayers, which is an important distinction.
Thank you.
And Rick, I'm glad you brought up the point, incremental tax increase, because certainly there's still taxes that people have to pay.
Yes.
But again, I think the goal here is, and the discussion here is, what Rick did is to try to come up with a plan that takes into account any incremental impact to taxes for the capital portion.
So somebody did raise a point a short time ago on, a decrease in the taxes, if the district did nothing and just said, all right, we're gonna let this roll off, and taxes are, in theory, would go down because of the drop-off. Let's face it, every district facility in the whole state, has needs, right? There's boilers, there's roofs, there's windows that need to get repaired, just as our own homes do. So if you let things like that go, there could be a position where, 7, 8 years from now, there could be, $200 million worth of work in the district that would cause a sharp increase in taxes for a particular year because you have to bring on so much one particular time. I think the strategy here is, bring it in slowly over time and, have a planned approach to bringing in whether there's things falling off, and you can mitigate any tax increase and still maintain your footprint of the buildings.
So I guess I would just maybe summarize a little bit and just ask another question with it too. So, I think my takeaway from our conversation certainly is looking at best practices, typical strategies that districts are using now, especially in a tax cap environment. We've got a couple opportunities coming up that we can strategically use to address significant needs in the district. We are certainly not going to be making any decisions tonight on our prioritization, but we know one of our next steps as we get further into the bond feasibility process is to hear back from the architects on some potential deeper dive into the facilities, potential strategies that might actually pair with some of these opportunities. So the board would have, I'm going to start to steal one of Claire's phrases, some plans that are good enough to criticize. So maybe some starting point proposals to help us prioritize, and certainly, as Jackie said, a transparent process for discussing those. Jim, just as one other point of information, especially thinking about the state aid aspect, we know that this is not the one and only way to address facilities, and there could be some other smaller opportunities for us to also start chipping away at some of these facilities' needs. Could you just talk a little bit about some thoughts there
Sure.
and how that would qualify as well for state aid?
Absolutely, and you make up a very good point. And Rick touched on it a little bit, but we can expand on it. Let's say, for instance, that at this point in time, when the year comes and our that $300,000 is falling off, if the district chooses, we could create a capital project, say for that same amount, $300,000, whether it's a Windows project or a pointing project or something of that size. And we would be able to get work done at that point in time and kind of pay for that project with cash, if you will, instead of with borrowed monies. That project would still go to state aid, would still get aided, so we'd still be able to receive aid for that over an amortized time period. But you'd still be able to get some work done. You wouldn't see any incremental change in that portion of people's taxes related to the capital exclusion. And then when the board and the community was ready to borrow that money, then you could also not do that project the following year. And then when you eventually borrow that money, that $300,000 could be used to service debt for a later borrowed project. So it could be a way to, if we're not ready right now, or if we find ourselves with an opportunity, it could be a way to let us bridge a year or so and still get some work done, and then not have the fluctuations, the up and down fluctuations of that local share for debt service. Is that about accurate, Rick?
Yeah, no, it's actually very correct. There's that strategy, obviously, with respect to if the time isn't right in 25 to vote on a project, given the lead time on bringing on local share, certainly an annual budgetary appropriation of capital is certainly something that's used, throughout the state. The other side of it is, obviously, if you're not ready for a $65 million project by then, which probably I would think would be too soon to do that, a $10 million project with, health and safety and some critical infrastructure things that might be having to get done sooner than later could be a strategy to do that way, or you just delay the process in total and do $65 million with the total package or whatever it may be, at some later date.
I'm wondering if Dara has any questions?
Hi, yeah, I just have a question, speaking of state aid or other aids, like, are there any other programs or alternatives around, we talked about sustainable options or other types of eco-friendly, things that we want to do. Are there any other alternative ways to your point, Rick, to start maybe other programs or different type of capital options?
As far as like energy, you think? You're
Yes.
Yeah, so the only other option really is what's called the energy performance contract. But that's sort of a separate sort of, program that doesn't require voter authorization. But it's something certainly to consider, but I don't know if the district's ever, thought through that process of, energy. It's called an energy performance contract. That's something certainly that some districts do throughout the state.
Jim, do you want to, I know we're just finishing up, we're on the tail end of an energy performance contract from a long time ago.
That's right.
You just want to,
Got some familiarity with it. The
Yeah.
board did that about 10 or 12 years ago. Really, it was, at that point in time, a large part of it was used for lighting, retrofits. Coincidentally enough, it was really right before LED lights became more popular, so a lot of it ended up being the fluorescent tubes, but more efficient ones. The basic premise is that you establish enough projects that provide savings to service other efficiency projects. So much in lights would then produce enough to save enough money to pay for a new boiler. That's a simple example. When you do that, you have to go through specific vendors. You have to prove it to the state that there's a savings. And there's a financing cost to it. And my belief right now is that if we want to do those projects, we could probably borrow or finance better than the EPCs allow us to at this point in time, if that's the belief that you really want to do an energy performance type of a project. I don't know, Rick, if that's what your thoughts are on what you see about the rates.
Fair statement, yeah. Some districts love them, some districts do not like them. There's a little bit more like nuances with those programs, but they serve a purpose. But I think where you're at now is just to do, straight, project that is in the best, needs of the district as far as, windows, boilers, roofs, without potentially needing to go through a lease transaction with an energy company.
But they serve a function in some parts of schools. Some school districts have very difficult times passing bonds or just kind of forming one up. And this allows some work to be able to get done.
I think the ideal with those is that they pay for themselves, but the
They're
ideal does
supposed
not
to.
always come to be.
And there's a tail to it. There's a performance time period, so you have to have a record of that performance time period, because if you don't meet the performance standards, that company is supposed to make you whole. Very rarely does that happen, but again, with those performance standards, and you have to do that until the end of the contract. So again, we're in a performance period right now, and once we stop doing that, obviously we won't have to engage. In this case, it's Honeywell, and they give us that performance information every year.
Jim, one thing we didn't talk about is a potential capital reserve fund. Do you want to maybe touch on that?
We don't have any capital reserves,
Just the fields.
just for fields right now. So if we had one of the things districts are also able to do is they'll leverage capital reserves with borrowings and kind of use two different sources of funding. Capital reserves are like your fund balance, they're just dedicated to a specific purpose. So that's just another option that's out there, and some districts, when they have those capital reserves, they can leverage a little bit of that. And Rick, if you could just talk a little bit too, again, we have bonds and bands, so we'll have different terms, like a band is a one-year borrowing, and a bond is a multi-year.
Yeah, so the analysis that we came up with respect to the 10 million and 55 assumed a 15-year bond right out of the gate, to finance a project to match up with the 15 years worth of aid. What we did and what's, common with school districts throughout the state is New York State law provides for the ability to do what's called a bond anticipation note, which is a one-year instrument, which could be renewed up to 5 years. What it allows for is districts and municipalities to take advantage of lower interest rates for, one-year note versus a long-term bond for at least the time versus during construction, and then convert it to bonds, 5 years later. That worked out really well with the last project because interest rates in the short term were at the lowest rates they've been in history. Not so much in this market, but it's certainly something that we could certainly, look to do, for this project as we look towards financing for this and see where rates are. Rates started to decline, once the Fed, or actually before the Fed decreased rates the last time, but we're in a bit of a challenging treasury and municipal bond market as of late. If rates, obviously you've been following the market, if rates have increased quite a bit over the last week or so. So we're hopeful that post-election and the Fed decreasing rates, that we'll be back into what's called a normal environment that we had back, a few years back. But I think that, the takeaways, obviously today, we'll talk about, what the next steps are. So you're going to have a report from the architect, hopefully soon. I think that creates a starting point for the board to decide, all right, here's what the needs are, whatever the number is. We know what we have the ability to issue as far as tax neutral project, $10 million vote over the next year, a couple years down the road, another $55 million vote. It provides for the district a strategy of, what our needs are and what we could afford. And then the analysis becomes, do we need additions, new buildings, strict renovations? And that would then further fine tune the analysis to say, if we want a new building, what could we afford if we have a new building as well as renovations? And I think that's where the Board of Education, at a further meeting, we could fine tune the analysis to say, this is what the district wants, what it's going to cost from there.
Right.
Thank you, Rick, and I don't know if other members of the board had any other input or questions. And if you think of them later on, please let me know, and happy to share them with Rick and get an answer for the members.
So this is just to kind of set the table for getting a bit more specific and coming
Absolutely.
in coming weeks. Okay. No decisions need to be made tonight. All right.
Correct, yeah.
Right.
Rick, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time with the Finance Committee and your time with the board tonight. We really appreciate it. I think we started and ended the day good 12 hours apart
Yeah.
with Rick
Thank you, yeah.
from Buffalo. So we really appreciate your time very much.
Thank you for your time.
Thanks so much. Appreciate it.
All right.
Thank you.
Take care, Rick. Thank you.
Okay. Next, we have the superintendent's report.
Yes.
Just
Oh,
not
go
to
ahead.
derail or anything,
Oh,
but
sure.
when are we going to talk about the sort of budget guidance? Now or like, because we're talking about
And actually,
finance?
that's what I was going to ask if we.
Oh, yeah, did we want to do it now?
We'll
Yeah,
I
certainly,
didn't know if we wanted-
yeah, I think we could either do it now, or we could do it through Jim's report. It's 6 1/2 dozen the other.
Well, since we brought it up,
Let's do it now.
let's do it.
Yeah, so just to fill anyone in who might not know what we're talking about. We also, at this time of year, we started last year with this, and it was very helpful to us as we head into the budget development process. Just to hear from the board some high-level, thoughts on what you're hoping to achieve through the budget process this year. So things you want us to keep in mind. I know that we've already, even as this year it still feels like it's early on, we've already hit on a couple potential priorities that you might want us to consider as we start to build out the budget over the next couple of months. So certainly would open it up to, to ask for your thoughts and guidance as we start to put things together, especially in light of this. I think this certainly is an added layer of context. that, even though, we may not be tackling building project expenses within this year, it sets the long-term context of what we also have to keep in mind for the community.
So, for me, right, it's keeping the programming we have today. I would like to maintain that as it is. I do know we have probably some, not challenges, but different things that are happening with the science curriculum and things that we have to look at for the upcoming year. And I'm not sure if that's going to require new or additional headcount, but all of what will come, with that. So definitely keeping our programming, because I think that's very important. But also we have, I'm going to say it again, facilities. And there are some short-term needs in the facilities we have to address immediately versus our long-term plans. Some of that is driven by us and things that need to happen. God forbid one of those boilers goes down. And other maybe because there is laws that are coming down the pike in
Right.
Albany that are going to have us face
Of
these
course,
things.
yeah.
And we really can't wait to do them long-term, so we're going to have to, I feel like, put something aside right now on this budget to try to address those needs.
So similar, so last year, right, the guidance was, let's be mindful, right, of major expansion in headcount or programming, given that we were headed into the strategic plan and the facilities planning. I think we want to take a similar approach this year because we are heading into understanding what the costs for the facilities upgrades will be. And also, I completely agree with Natalie. We want to maintain programming, and we want to be supportive of the strategic plan moving forward. But my understanding at this point, the strategic plan items happening are kind of diving deeper into what we're already doing and might not necessarily require a large expansion of headcount. So just being mindful again of that. That doesn't mean the budget won't increase. I mean, we saw this last year. Even if you maintain things, that expenses went up in many ways, and that we have to expect that there's sort of headwinds that will continue on the budget. Maybe we could talk a little bit about those. And then I think we want to take a look at what it would cost or the additional resources for making our the registration process fully electronic, which would be helpful to the district to be able to, look at things in a more systematic way. So those are few things I have.
Jackie actually mentioned something that I had on my list, but regarding the strategic plan, and I remember as we were putting it together, looking at this massive, wonderful plan and thinking, there's got to be some increased costs that are associated with this plan.
Yes.
So what you said was helpful to hear, that some of the changes or some of the things to be implemented may not necessarily increase cost or are part of what we're doing already. But I'd love to see us, as the budget is being developed and work is being done on the strategic plan, information coming to the board that shows how things are being prioritized so that we know just that thought process of, why we might be pursuing one thing versus another related to the strategic plan. Another thing is I was thinking about Tracy's report on special education and concerns me with all the needs that have been identified and continue to be identified. So how are we going to address that? And then something that I always want to bring up, and sometimes I feel like it might get lost in the shuffle a little bit, is the arts program is amazing in Pelham, and I'd like just to see it expand. I know I'll get a lot of feedback from parents who want to see it grow, just like we see some of the other programs grow. So those would be a few of the things that I have in mind.
Yeah,
And
the
I'll-
music program.
That's what I mean by arts.
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I
Sorry,
thought you
music
meant.
and arts. Yeah.
Performing arts.
Performing arts,
Yeah, one of the things I will say to that, to help hopefully alleviate some of your concern, we did have some further conversations about the special education, and certainly space is an issue.
Yeah,
The one good thing as of right now, and I know Tracy will go much more into this once we get to those line by line and staffing discussions, but the way that we're forecasting some of the programmatic needs, if we were, and Tracy will correct me if I'm wrong in this, if we were to need to open an additional section of the self-contained class, we likely will be able to repurpose current staff for that
Okay.
program, which is great. Because
That's good.
it's a big,
Yeah.
it's a big expense, and we invest a lot in those programs, and we want to do that.
Right.
But it is nice when we can take existing staff to help where we maybe are
Yeah.
contracting program here to help offset the growth in program there. So
yeah.
hopefully that will help to mitigate some of those
Mhm.
additional costs. But, there's lots. She's got her crystal ball, she's polishing it off, and she always does a great job with that. But yeah, so no, definitely, I think we're also very attuned to those concerns.
Yeah, yeah, just hearing about the number of students that need the support of the special education program and how that continues to grow
Yeah.
equates to resources being needed to
Absolutely.
support them. So
Absolutely.
how are we going to do that and,
Yeah.
and everything else that we want to do and maintain? So
Great. I think Dara had something she wanted to add in. You're muted still.
You're muted.
Hi,
There
okay,
you go.
hi. Three things that come up too, I think are just reiterating, advancing the strategic plan, like what are those items that we, really want to focus on, the priorities around that special education. That's been on my mind around, kind of the capacity. And then the other thing is, a lot of these things will increase costs, but really looking at efficiencies, maybe there are things, like that will also help offset if there are opportunities to just explore or look at what are efficiencies that can help in a new way. So those were the three items for me.
Yeah, and I was thinking about the increase in transportation expense, right? I don't know if I think we've talked about this enough that there might not be many options, but if we look at options that, just to your point, Dara, is there a way to do transportation more efficiently? We get asked this a lot, so either way, we need to, just talk about that in the budget related to that.
Yeah, and I wanted to add a couple other pieces. Two thoughts on the strategic plan, or one on the strategic plan and one on the efficiency piece. And I know we talked a bit about this morning at the Finance Committee as well. Every time that, when we budget, we build the budget, we usually estimate potential retirements as just kind of standard, just we have to start the budgeting process with some assumptions. So Jim and Jackie, again, do a great job of that. Every time we do have retirements from the district, we always use that as an opportunity to scrutinize our class sizes, our programmatic needs, the numbers of sections, et cetera. So that is a process we always do look at. And we've done that in prior years where we basically are able to reduce staffing through attrition, is what we call it. The position's vacated, we do an analysis and determine if it's needed. If it is needed, we fill it. If we think that we can still continue to keep the program, the robust program at the same level and still to provide services to students, but maybe not need as much staff, that gives us the opportunity to contract a little bit, but without negatively impacting students or programs. So that is part of our process. The other thing that I would add, with the program, like we said, we are really, this year it's been really about planning and putting structures and systems in place to deepen the work, as you said. So that's been, we haven't really had to look at ads. As we get further down the road, we may identify areas where we may come to you to ask for, some additional resources, right? And would certainly make those connections to the plan. I think one of the things that we've all been feeling a little bit is we've built a lot of program over the last 5 to 10 years, and our money has been rightly so invested into the classrooms, but I think a lot struggling with around the district is often support staff, not necessarily having, whether it's clerical support staff, custodial support staff, supervisory and assistant staff. Those are some areas I think we're starting to feel some needs, so we may be looking in those areas. And another a programmatic ad that I know we've talked about and that I've asked Claire to be focused on this year is looking at the potential for universal pre-K. We do get funding for that every year. We don't have the space for it, so I want to be clear on that. We do not have the space for it, nor is it enough to really fund a self-sustaining program. But are there opportunities to work with third-party partners that could, that the funds that we do have could cover costs, or it could be a minimal add to the district that could achieve a really important program for our students and for our community. So just know that she is working on that, and as we approach the budget season, I've asked her to come with kind of a conceptual cost of what that may look like, as well as the registration, accelerating that process. So she's already starting to take a look at those items.
That's great.
So, any other pieces you'd like us to keep in mind? We do walk into this conversation assuming that we're staying within the tax cap, so be clear about that. That is our goal. We know that all districts at some point in time with the tax cap are going to face some challenges around that. So just want to be transparent about that. But that is an assumption that.
Just to add my 2 cents, I think, so that, as you said, that the guidance from last year was pump the brakes on hiring. If you looked at the kind of the increases in our sort of operating costs over the last 5 years, they just weren't sustainable. And so I think we did a good job at kind of reining those in. And sadly, in my opinion, we need to sort of continue to be very judicious about headcount additions. And the reason why I say that is because the storm clouds are gathering in terms of headwinds that I think are inevitable, which include, but are certainly not limited to, interest rates are going down. So that we've been the beneficiaries of a kind of interest rate revenue windfall on our deposits, and that's sort of largely, well, maybe not entirely go away, but that's running out of steam. Healthcare just seems to get increasingly expensive, and even if you just plug a 10% increase into our plan based off last year, that's just like $1 million just on healthcare potentially. State aid is also unknown. Again, we enjoyed the bounties of a state aid catch-up. That's highly unlikely to happen again. So you shouldn't expect an increase in revenues, or a material increase in revenues from state aid. There's some building aid drop-off, I believe, which is just like a sort of technical timing thing, as some aid from prior years begins to drop off, and we need to fill that gap. So even if we kept our head count completely the same, I still think there's going to be a material, like a real increase in the budget from things that we just don't control.
Right.
And so I think we need to be pretty, like I say, just very judicious about the things we do control. As other people said, another cost that just seems qualitatively to feel like it's increasing exponentially is special ed, and I support that. I support those increases in expenses. So I just think that the guidance from last year, which is to be very cautious about headcount additions, for me, should be kind of maintained. And as far as the strategic plan goes, I think we spent a good period of this evening talking about the fruits of the strategic plan, which is how are we going to fund and capitalize excellent learning environments for our students. So that's my opinion.
Well, and I think a lot of you covered like the things that I had in my mind about like when I think about like budget planning for next year, especially when it comes to like how we can prioritize all of the things that we have in this like amazing strategic plan. But it also the thing about hiring that I wanted to touch on, coming back to what you had said, Dr. Champ, is that we do need to plan, and Tricia's going to be busy with like all the upcoming retirements and things and planning for that. And so planning and budgeting for recruitment, but also any professional development, because with new teachers, right, like, so, and that could be a big line item, because we wouldn't want to see any decrease, or not to say decrease, that's probably not the right way to say it, but we just wouldn't want to feel it, you know, in our students or in the amazing programs that we've spent so many times building, or the special education, you know, for all of our kids. What, you know, so making sure we have enough support for our teachers coming in.
Yeah, that's an excellent point.
And if we're signaling things to people listening at home, and this is a very non-scientific signal, but
It's a bad signal.
We'll put the
I just
bat
looked at
signal
the. I wish I had a special button. I looked at the average tax increases over the last 5 years have averaged tiny bit below 2.5%. That's what we've been able, through kind of financial stewardship and judicious use of our reserves and all that kind of stuff, and all those measures, we've managed to keep the average increase over the last 5 years at 2.5%. And as we all know, the world has become a lot more expensive, a lot more than 2.5% more expensive. And so I think, you know, we will do everything we can to minimize the impact on the taxpayer. But I think it would be naive to assume that we can just keep chugging along at an average 2.5% indefinitely.
Yeah, and I'll add to that, if it can't stay at 2.5%, you know, something above that something mildly above that might stave off having to take something bigger, you know, bigger later. So there will be we want to think about sort of stability in the tax increases over time.
Yeah, I don't know what that looks like in the short term, but I think the long-term view has to be, like, we talk about this all the time when we talk about the budgets. More than 3/4 of the budget is people, and if you're going to keep a quality teaching program, you know, that staff isn't, in the long term, you're not going to be able to keep them at a 2% increase year over year, because it's just not keeping up with costs, and so, or the cost of living. So at some point, the budget's going to get squeezed. Hopefully, we can continue to do the good work to defer that day, but at some point, that day is going to come.
Yeah.
Thank you. I was going to ask Jim if he had any other financial context, but I think you've hit on.
Yeah, I mean, we've had
most
some
of it.
very good discussions at our finance committee meeting. And I like the use of our judiciously looking to spend the district's resources. Again, we're at the front end of the budget development process, and if it feels like we're always talking about budget, it's because about nine months out of the year, we pretty much are.
As we are.
And the rest of it's the audit.
And the rest of it's the audit, exactly. But this is the front end of it, and I think this guidance and this directionally is helpful for us. And the committee will continue to meet. The members of the committee of the board will continue to meet. And certainly any board members that ever have any questions, we'll make ourselves available and explain anything. And if you don't understand it, we'll explain it again and explain it again, because it's important. And you're going to get stopped at the grocery store, and we want you to be comfortable with being able to explain it as well. It's important. So thank you. Thank you for your thoughts and your comments.
All right, Jim, thank you for that. And then just a reminder, and I'm sure he'll say it as we head into the budget season, if anyone, really just tapping into that, I think especially Dara and Catherine, I think every new board member just about has taken them up on their offer. Jim and Jackie are happy to sit down and walk you through everything related to school finance. It's very different than finance in other realms, and they have a great way of explaining that to the layperson. So please take them up on those offers when the time comes. Sincerely. Yeah.
You're going to be getting a note from me. I'll take you up on it. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm going to write you that email now and schedule that meeting.
I know. It's Catherine, I'll just copy you.
And you'll be getting a big binder for the line by
Another
line.
binder coming your way.
I mean, this might be the biggest one.
Yes, and I
We should be in
think.
the binder business. Right?
Yes, I am so.
Take out
And the
stock.
tax cap is like a whole nother level of fun.
Oh, was that a separate?
Of math, yes.
The
And
separate
by the time you
101
actually
meeting?
understand that your term is up, so.
It takes about 3 years.
So true. Yeah, so we do start the process now, just again, too, for our new folks. You will get a binder after February break.
Yeah.
That's generally our assembly time, the business office's assembly time
Yes.
is put that together in preparation for the line-by-line budget, which launches in March. March, so. All right,
And I know
thanks.
there's a lot of work that goes into that binder, so
Yes.
thank everyone in advance for
Thank you.
working on the budget.
Do we want to bring
Okay.
up public comment?
I'm sorry, what?
Do we want to bring up?
Oh, sure.
We'll get you.
We can move up. Is someone here to make public comment?
Got John, my intern.
Oh.
Oh,
Okay. Yeah. Yes. So none. Welcome.
Amy, do you want to say anything? You're just here for the fun.
It's supposed to be comment.
It's supposed to be comment, but why don't you phrase your question as a comment?
We may or may not. be
Jeopardy
able
in reverse.
So
It's a good
Amy
workaround.
Sperano, 555 Manor Lane. My question, if I'm permitted, is,
You speaking to Mike?
as it relates to the easement for Julian's Playground, you mentioned that it still needs to get approval through New York State Ed. I'm wondering if the easement process is the same process that we would go through for any other building project in our district? Is it a long lead time?
I would say we're not 100% sure on that. Our assumption is, yes, it's the same process.
All right, cool. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you.
And yes, it's a long lead time, I think.
And yes, it
Yes.
is a long, I know Rick mentioned in his presentation, projects are taking at least 6 months at this point in time for approval.
And most of that lead time is waiting for your number to come up. So you
Correct.
can't really do anything to expedite it.
Yes, like we said, I think before, just the week before our last meeting, we just got the HVAC units approved. That were passed by the voters 2 votes, 2 years ago. So, yeah.
And the fitness room renovation
Same.
took like 8 months to get approved.
Yeah.
That came
Yes.
a week later.
That came like 2 weeks ago, too. Yep. Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you.
And I think also I think it's accurate, factually accurate to say the only entity that can apply for a permit is the school district, right?
Yes,
That's correct.
that is the guidance that we have been provided by our attorneys.
And I have to say, it is important for the school to apply for the permits, because if we don't, we could potentially jeopardize our state aid. So it is something we take very seriously.
And it also increases liability for the district if we don't do that. Right?
Yeah, without stated approval, we won't have a work permit. I'm not
Like
getting
a
my terminology
certificate
correct.
of,
Yeah, work permit, which would then make any work done on the property, that would increase the liability by any work being done on the property without proper authorization would be a problem.
yes.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Superintendent's
Okay.
report, 4.2.
Yes, good evening. Definitely going to keep things brief tonight, and I know the cabinet as well, I've asked them to keep theirs brief too. As the board knows, we did our quarterly report. I was a little past the quarter, appreciate your patience on that, but a lot of work went into that, and certainly we've had a lot of great discussion tonight. So for my report tonight, just really I picked one theme. I always go home, my husband asks me, "What do you do?" And I just say, "I don't know, I have meetings."
So nice of him.
Have meetings, talk to people. But what I wanted to report on is some of what I do recently that actually was just very much of a theme that I just think is really important in light of everything in our strategic plan and all of the things that are on our plate. Yesterday was really an awesome day in my meetings sort of way. I got to start the day with Anne Marie and Laura Caruso and several other folks from Pelham at the Westchester Children's Association Advocacy Breakfast. It was something that we were all invited to, them through their Pelham Together work. Me as superintendent, we had the opportunity to hear from Max Stossel. He's a speaker, a gentleman who used to be in the tech field, but who came out of the tech field to start an organization called Social Awakening to try to bring humanity back into technology. And what it was as as someone who worked in the tech field, he got to see from the inside a lot of the the design, the business approaches, the algorithmic approaches, and is seeing the ways that technology in its design has negative impacts on us as human beings, as us as a society, on our youth. So it was a really engaging conversation, or keynote speech to this group, folks who are here to support youth across the region. So folks like the Pelham Together and other agencies that work to support families and youth. So it was just really challenging, and a lot of he was bringing forward a lot of research, a lot of experience from technology, really a lot of awareness about the gaming technology that is built into social media in particular, and some of the features on a lot of the technology that we work with, and Anne Marie can certainly chime in on this too, that are impacting our youth. And what do we do about it, and what is the data starting to show? A lot of what he shared was also some of the emerging research that is in this book that is on the board's desks. So I just wanted to point that out. So coincidentally, we had, a lot of folks around are reading this book. It's certainly not it's not the only book out there. There's a lot of different perspectives to be considered. But I read this over the summer, and our administrative team is just starting a book study on this. And I wanted to share a copy with the board. It's The Anxious Generation, for anyone who's watching on TV, by Jonathan Haidt.
How alarming is it? On a scale of 1 to 10, how depressed did it make you feel?
Makes you pretty anxious.
It really makes you think about a lot of things. And I think that's really what we saw in it. And again, it's not the only perspective out there, but I think it's hard to see the research that's presented and not stop and think deeply about what does this mean for us. It talks about, the thing I liked about the book is it talks about what should schools be doing, but not just what schools should be doing, because we can't fix everything ourselves. What should parents be thinking about? What should legislators be thinking about? What should we globally be thinking about? What should tech companies be thinking about and doing? Because it's a very complex issue, and it's not one that any one of us can solve on our own. But it does present you with some challenging questions. So we're starting to do a book study on this. We've got a copy for the board, and certainly wanted to offer, if we decided we all wanted to commit to reading it, maybe pick a meeting or two where we want to dedicate some time to having a conversation around the board table about, some of the ideas that are here. So the speaker yesterday quoted from a lot of the research in here as well. And then I will also add, paired with this, Mr. Llewellyn is just assembling right now a committee at the high school to start looking at the digital device question. And I've offered to buy copies of the book for the committee, so he was going to take me up on that offer, so they'll also be using that, and that's a shared stakeholder group with students, parents, and staff to look at, again, those same tough questions. What does this mean for us in our practice? He's also starting a committee on academic integrity. And that's the broad issue and broad lens through which we think it's the right approach to be thinking about AI, digital tools, and all that on. So we're just trying to take a really thoughtful look with the staff. So we started our day with the Westchester Children's Association. This is a book, again, that we're all looking to engage in collectively as an organization that I think is going to bring some fruitful conversations. And then we got to end our day together, and I think most of the board was able to be there just as community members attending last night's great event hosted by Pelham Together, where the Youth Council presented the work that they've been doing. It was wonderful to hear from our students, high schoolers and middle schoolers, about the student-led initiatives and how they've taken their ideas and brought them to fruition, as well as the partnership that we now have with Pelham Together, where their social work interns are working with our students, providing some counseling groups that increased our capacity to meet the needs of students, as well as they've been a great resource for us to be able to recommend students and families that need that support in a low or no-cost environment right here in the community. So just to be able to see the seamless partnership now that's growing as a result of the commitment and the focus of Pelham Together with the work in the school. It was just a whole 2 days, less 48 hours, I think, of my life have been really anchored around this. And just the joint concerns that we all have about our students' mental health and wellness, and what can we as a system do? What piece do each of us play, and what might we be doing to move the dial to really help our kids? So appreciative for all the work that folks have been doing, Pelham Together, keep looking at Anne Marie. I mean, it's incredible the things that they're doing. They take it and they run. They're just like such, they take the ball and run with it and just bring things from ideas into fruition so quickly and a lot more easily than we can do sometimes. But just to be that supplemental partner. And they're just finishing a series of parent workshops, and we had a student assembly, so the complementary work is appreciated. And I just think this is really, it is a top of mind topic for each of us. And I'll even add one more piece. I met with some of our faith leaders from the community, which I try to do every year or two. And we had a great discussion around this as well, because of course, what we see here, they see in their congregations. And so to be working on how do we support families, how do we support our children, how do we provide safe, healthy, balanced experiences inside of school, outside of school. It's great to have such wonderful community partners to work with. So wanted to share that. So that's what I've been doing. That's what I do, is talk to people and go in meetings. And it just happened to be a wonderfully meaningful series of connected opportunities that I wanted to share. And then finally, just a couple other things. I have been making the rounds to all the PTAs. It was the first PTA meetings for a lot of them, so it's great to see our parents. Appreciate their continued engagement with their schools. And I've been sharing our work on facilities as well. So getting a lot of good feedback there, some really creative ideas coming out already. So I was pleased for that. And then I think, as the board knows, we're also getting all of our district committees finally up and running. So we've got all of our membership in place now, and those first rounds of meetings are up and running. So looking forward to that work really getting up and off the ground for this year.
Yeah, and we also had our second board coffee last
Yes,
week.
that's right.
So,
Yep, and great conversation around facilities there. And again, some really important ideas came from that too.
yep.
So we are, I think the idea of having themes has been helpful. So I think this next one is probably going to be a curriculum theme next month. So we're excited just to have so many people coming out. Did anything you wanted to
No,
add?
that was great. Yeah, it was great to see you there at the meeting yesterday. Was it yesterday morning? Feels like it was a long
Yeah,
time
the
ago.
breakfast, yes.
I'll say that the speaker, Max Stossel, he's featured in The Social Dilemma, if anyone's seen that
That's right.
Netflix documentary, which is very eye-opening. I'd love to see him come and be a speaker here at the school. However, we can make that happen, because he was a great speaker. He talks to kids all over the country, and was sharing a lot of information that I think we all know, but we saw he gave us examples of things that the technology companies have set up with social media that really work against us, and talked a lot about how schools are banning cell phones. And I had a chance to talk to him about the best way to go about doing that so that it's successful. I actually have the audio version of the book, which I have not yet started, and now I have the
We're both cheating on that.
yeah the
It's a
book version.
completely
So
viable.
yeah. Oh yeah, I love my audiobooks. So I want to say I'm looking forward to reading it. I am looking forward to reading it, but I'm also a little anxious about reading it.
It's challenging.
Yeah. So, but yeah, and speaking for Pelham Together, the partnership has been wonderful. So it's been great. Thank you.
Okay, that's it for me.
Okay, excellent. Next is 4.3, Board of Education Committee reports.
We had Finance Committee this morning, we covered everything.
Yes. We,
We had a community engagement and belonging meeting last Friday. It was our first meeting, so we welcomed the new members of the committee, some new board members that are joining me this year on that committee. A lot of our focus was on the agenda for the year, which should not be a surprise. It's probably going to be geared around facilities and what we're doing in terms of, engaging the community in that conversation. And we also discussed some of the relevant, things that may be happening in Albany when it comes to advocacy and things that may impact us, foundation aid. How do we get fully funded on preschool? What does that mean? And other areas that we could advocate for. That comes later in the year, well, next year. So it comes around January, February, March, when we start writing our letters. They are successful, so I know it's like, writing letters, but they do work. So we also engage a local I don't know what they're like local politicians from Westchester. Are they senators, state?
Elected officials,
Right.
or state
So-
election officials, yeah.
So we do engage them in order to advocate on our behalf for Pelham as well. So lots of conversation on how that will play out in the upcoming year. But again, a lot of, I think, our focus will probably be on how do we engage the community on our facilities conversation. I personally want to see another World Cafe when we bring the community together, because I just think for the last 2 years we've done them and they've been very successful at bringing people out, as well as our board coffees that have been very successfully attended in the last 2 of them. And our next one is going to be a nighttime event, so please join us for those working parents that can't come out during the day. So we look forward to seeing more people.
Thank you.
We had our Personal Growth and Achievement Committee meeting on the 17th, and it was a great first meeting. First thing we did was we reviewed our mission to ensure that we're furthering the goals of the strategic plan's priority of personal growth and achievement. So we talked through that. We heard from Dr. Callahan and Suzanne Short about the work that they're doing this year, and then a portion of the meeting was dedicated to talking about the potential changes to the science curriculum in light of the changes to the next-gen science standards. But more info about that is going to come in an update on November 6th at a public meeting.
Here, yeah.
Here, right. Claire and Dr. Callahan will talk to that.
Thank you. I think that might be it for committees, right?
Yep, and we've got, I think our other committees are on the books. We've got policy scheduled for next week.
Wellness.
The school culture and belonging.
Yes, you got it.
Yeah, we've updated all of our committee names to match the new strategic plan, so we're all still shifting our lexicon. So, but yeah, that's upcoming as well. Wellness, I know, is upcoming, and I think Tuesday of next week. Great, so.
And we'll schedule facilities soon.
Yes, oh, yes.
We were waiting for tonight, and then
Yeah,
we'll schedule.
yeah, we were
the-
waiting for tonight. We're going to be
Yeah.
meeting with our architects tomorrow, now that we've got a little bit more feedback from tonight's conversation. So after that meeting, that will precipitate our next facilities.
Bless you.
Great.
Thank you. Okay, next we have 4.4, Assistant Superintendent's Update on Personal Growth and Achievement.
Thank you so much. So today marked our second Professional Learning Community, or PLC, day of the school year. We are extremely grateful to the Board of Education and to the community for supporting these early release days throughout the year. Research shows that the structure of the PLC promotes collaborative, data-driven, and growth-oriented teaching culture in which everyone is focused on coming together to think about and improve student learning. In case anyone's curious about some of the things that teachers are engaging in, I wanted to kind of shed some light on that. The afternoon is structured to create time for building, department or grade level meetings, and then professional learning community meetings in which teachers of same subjects or grade levels come together and discuss. They share ideas and strategies and resources. They engage in very targeted professional learning organized by the directors or their building principals or the district. They come together to analyze student learning data, to identify trends, gaps, successes, and needs for support, so that they can continuously work together to make data-informed instructional decisions. And they also, work to develop a shared understanding of best practices, and then what effective instruction looks like. This creates a culture of support in which everyone's working together towards a common goal, and then also identifying clear and measurable goals and continuously checking in and how they're doing in reaching those goals, and all in support of student learning and student success. And then finally, tonight's short, I just hope everyone has had a chance to take a stroll down Wolf's Lane and see
Yes.
the storefronts that our art students decorated for Halloween. Really amazing work and a space theme. So if you haven't yet, please do get down there and check it out. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I did see the wonderful artwork. Next is 4.5, Assistant Superintendent's update on belonging and wellness.
Good evening, everyone. So as I reported last year, Pelham just started last year. We were part of the Southern Westchester BOCES Regional Crisis Response Team, which supports school districts after a crisis occurs by providing counseling, consultation, debriefing, and support. Myself, Dr. DeSoy, and Dr. Hergenrother all are part of the district's Regional Crisis Response Team. And I just want to after the tragic event that occurred in Eastchester School District last week with the loss of one of their teachers, I did speak to my colleague there who reached out and asked for help. So I want to thank Dr. DeSoy and Dr. Hergenrother, who did go and spend the day in Eastchester School District in the high school last week, supporting students and staff as they work through the loss that they've experienced as a school community. So I just wanted to publicly thank them. They both have full caseloads, but they were able to adjust during that day to be available. And, it exemplifies the meaning of community and teamwork and being there for others when it's most needed. So I wanted to make sure we thank them. In the quarterly report, I shared where we are with our work with the Recubs grant. We actually had our first consultation meeting with the BOCES team on Monday. Dr. Champ, Ms. Comerford, and myself met with them, and we talked about how we're going to frame their support for us in terms of what we need to get done in terms of this grant and how they can support us and how the grant actually leans into our strategic plan and our work around SEL and MTSS. So that's exciting work. Last week, I participated in a meeting with the commissioner from Department of Community Mental Health, Michael Orth, on the topic of building comprehensive mental health systems in our school. So I always like to stay closely connected to the commissioner. So Pelham is on his repertoire of what he's thinking about when he's thinking about resources and including us in conversations at the table. And we were able just to hear an update on the county's supports for communities and schools in terms of mental health. And lastly, I did want to mention, as part of our new contractual partnership with Pelham Together, in which they help us find speakers on topics that we talk about together, which are, we have a Pelham Advisory Together committee now. So we meet and we talk about what are the topics that are on the forefront that we see, boots on the ground. So next Monday, October 28th, in their series, it's the last of this series, which is going to be hosted in person, 7 p.m. in Alumni Hall, and it was a series of parent workshops on digital literacy that was spearheaded by Sarah Tremblay, and the topic will be on friendship and texting. And interestingly enough, Sarah had reached out to me over the summer to talk about wanting to do these talks, and I said, well, we're leaning into this partnership with Pelham Together. Let's streamline this. And actually, Max Sassel was a speaker. She was the first person that she wanted to bring in. But maybe through our collaboration, we can work on funding that. So that's it for me.
Thank you.
Sarah was at the breakfast with us yesterday.
Was
too,
she?
so
Yeah.
it all-
Was she
it's all
having like
connected.
speaker envy because we couldn't get them? Yeah.
Okay. Next, we have 4.6, Executive Director's update on human resources and leadership.
Good evening, everybody. The first thing I just want to draw your attention to is later in the agenda, we have the approval of the salary reclassifications. So this is really a great time to celebrate the commitment several of our staff members have shown to lifelong learning, and there's a lot still in the pipeline working on that. But these folks have gone through and met the requirements for this term. We will have another reclassification period in February, so stay tuned for more of that. And then the other thing I do want to mention is a huge thank you to Dr. Callahan. So he's working with me to help expand our partnership with Iona, specifically in terms of student teachers and substitutes in the short term, and then in the long term, how do we build this pipeline of growing STEM teachers so that they come to Pelham and they're STEM teachers. So we've had a great conversation with Dr. Hardigree and Dr. Kristen. We are starting with our short-term goal of building our capacity of substitute teaching. So Dr. Callahan and I will be going over to Iona on November 13th, and we're going to be running a Substitute Teaching 101 panel to sort of demystify what substitute teaching is like, answer questions, and really get the application and hiring process going. So we're really looking forward to that part. And then next week, I also have a meeting in the books with Dr. Abrams to talk about expanding our student teachers here in Pelham as well. So those two things are underway. And then we're continuing to talk about how do we build this pipeline. So what's interesting is when we talked to Mr. Farrell, our director of counseling, he was noting that one of the top schools our schools apply to, get into, and go to is actually Iona. So is there a way to capitalize on that in that partnership? Things such as, is it possible if we want to do a presentation that they have the right scientific machinery over there that we could use? Do they have speakers coming in that our students or our staff could go and see? So we're exploring a lot of different avenues, but we're really excited about this partnership. They have several grants in the process. They have a lot of programs in process. And so being able to partner with them and actually start to build this pipeline of bringing in really exciting, dedicated content knowledge educators through their program is exciting. So, but that would not have started without Dr. Callahan really getting in there and pushing for the people he knows. So a big thank you to him.
Yeah, so I'm just curious, were we aware of the program and just didn't have sort of the capacity, didn't have the capacity to go and track it down, or is this a new?
So it's a little bit of both. I
Yeah.
think, so some of it, they've had some administrative changes, as we have.
Yes.
And then they've also, they have a grant in particular that they work with Title I schools, and they didn't realize Pelham had Title I schools. So
I see.
just being able to get in there, start the conversations. He has several contacts there. I do as well. And so just bringing people together and expanding that conversation has really been helping to put things in motion quicker.
Yeah, that's excellent.
Yeah, I want to thank you because you're taking such a proactive approach to, the pipeline, the internship, the student, teachers, all the things that we need in order to benefit our teachers and give them that extra support that they may need, especially at the lower level grades. So thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. And I think some of it's really interesting because we're rethinking the way we do things, right? So we used to say, internships you do during your fall semester, you do during your spring semester. And sometimes students are just too busy to fit it in. But every now and then they have this block of time in January in between semesters that would be a great time to capture them, to come in, even just to observe in some of our STEM classrooms, to see the amazing things our teachers do, could really hook some people into saying, actually, I do want to go into STEM teaching.
Yeah, yes, thank you. Next is Jim, 4.7, Assistant Superintendent's Update on Facilities and Sustainable Learning Environments.
Thank you. And I was happy, hopefully, that the presentation earlier with Rick Yancey was helpful to the board and to the community, and certainly happy to answer questions later on. A couple items on the agenda this evening. We're asking the board to approve an AS7 report, which is a report from BOCES, which is really a summary of all services received last fiscal year from BOCES. So this is one of those timing issues that comes at year end. All this information has already been contemplated into the books, but if you look at it, you'll see it's just that summary of everything that's happened. There's also a report that we prepare every year of all of our students, the tuition students from the district, generally made up of 4 primary buckets. Tuition students who are children of staff members, teachers, custodians, clerical workers, students who reside in the proper New York City, the borders of New York City, but have historically attended the district and their tuition is paid for by New York City. Some tuition students for special education that we have when we have space available. We're able to make that space available to other districts. And then we have a very small number of other students who who attend. They may have attended school, moved, had specific circumstances, and that's why you may see them there. Or they had a contract to buy the house, but they had not quite been in district when the school year opened, and they were counted as tuition students when the year started. And when that happens, we have folks, they pay the tuition. When they move in, they give us that documentation, and then we rebate them a pro rata share of their tuition at that point in time per board policy. So that's something, again, that's come up. We have some treasurer reports, kind of dovetailing a little bit of what we talked today. As you look at those reports, you'll see our interest income back in July, we would get 5.2% on our overnight deposits. It's down about 18 basis points at the conclusion of our September report, so to 5.02%. So 2 years ago, I never would have imagined 5%, so that's still a nice number.
Yeah.
But we see that trend there, and we see directionally where that's gone, and that speaks to a little bit about what we talked about earlier. And then again, obviously we spoke a lot about the other things, so I'm just gonna back out of the conversation right now and leave you to the rest.
I'll just point out one more thing on the tuition page. You can certainly see, I know you don't have the prior years here, but the private pay family number has reduced significantly since we started in the district. So we've kind of been phasing that out over time, except for a couple specific situations. There were times in the past that we did, the district did use that as a revenue
Right.
to help, address some budget issues, but given our current enrollment and space issues and
Space.
projected growth, that's, I think, continuing to phase that out is, I think, the more sensible approach. And I will say, for those who may not be looking at this document, it's only 5 students total in the private pay situation right now.
And some were those beginning of the year things, so.
Right, a
they
couple
are
were the
residents now. They may have been private tuition at the start of the
Right.
year.
Yeah, and get the credit for it
Yeah.
when they become residents. Okay. Okay. We've done no communications and comments from the public. I think we could take 6.1 to 6.8 as a consent agenda. Do I have a motion to approve 6.1 to 6.8?
So move.
Second.
Okay. Any comments or questions? I do want to,
I'll touch quickly.
I want to
on a
hear
cou-
about the trip to Montreal.
Yeah, just super quickly on these, the ones that haven't already been touched on.
Yep.
Personnel authorization, just updating to make sure that all of our DASA and DASA coordinators are properly designated at the district and building level. Girls ice hockey, that's just, we need to vote each year to authorize the merge team. I think we tend to be a big portion of this girls ice hockey team regionally. We're happy to continue to support them for that. The trip to Montreal, this is actually Model UN. I think they were supposed to go last year.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it got postponed or canceled, so this is just a reauthorization of a trip that was supposed to happen last year. So, yeah, it's Model UN traveling to Montreal. So very excited, and it's a
Fun.
great city, great program. They're excited to be going, and anytime students travel outside of the country, we ask the board to authorize that. And then the agreement with authentic communications.
Or connections?
Connections, I
Yes.
think that's supposed to be the title.
Yes.
That is our, the student resilience survey that we've been giving every other year for the last several years. Tracy's mentioned that in the past. That gives us historical data to work with Pelham Together and district programming. So that will be given to the students this spring, students in 8th, 10th, and 12th grade. We give that every 2 years to those same cohorts so that we get longitudinal data on those particular cohorts. It's anonymized, so it's not meant to be student-specific, but it does give us trends and patterns for programmatic planning purposes. That will be, certainly, letter will go out in advance of that survey to families.
Yes.
Parents will have the opportunity they'd have to come in because it's proprietary information, but they would be available for them to come and preview to make an informed decision about whether to allow their child to take that. But again, that's something that we've been doing for several years now. And then the independent contractor services agreement, that's to continue, you may have remembered from a prior appointment over the summer, we had brought on Wafa Westerfield to assist with our title grants, Titles 1, 2, 3, and 4. We're asking to approve her for continued coaching services as Ms. Comerford continues to transition into the role. This will help her, Wafa to complete the full year training cycle on that, so that from that point on after this, Claire will be able to take that process fully over in future years. And Wafa's done a great job of making sure our procedures and protocols are by the book, and she's been a great resource.
Any comments or questions? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed, any abstentions? Motion carries. We can do 6.9. I'll take a motion to accept a donation. It's actually 2 donations.
So moved. Second.
Okay. We want to thank Pelham Civics for their support of the Academy program at the middle school. So I'll read that one. Resolve that upon the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools, the Board of Education of the Pelham Union Free School District does hereby accept the monetary donation of $25,000 for the Pelham Middle School Extended Academy After-School Program, and that gratitude be bestowed upon its donor, the Pelham Civic Association. So thank you. The second donation is we want to give thanks to the Simonite School community for their support of the Birthday Book Club. Be it further resolved that upon the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools, the Board of Education of the Pelham Union Free School District does hereby accept the donation of $3,020 to be used to purchase books for the Simonite School Birthday Book Club, which celebrates the students' birthdays by gifting books in their names, and that gratitude be bestowed upon their donor, the Simonite School community. And the board, we will also authorize the superintendent to accept future donations for this purpose during the 2024-2025 school year. Okay? So thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you to the Civics. They are, like the Pelham Education Foundation, very good partners to the board, to the district. So we'd like to, thank them for their donation.
I know many of us are looking forward to the gala on Friday, too, so.
Yep,
really
something to
appreciate
break
their-
up the week, hopefully.
That's right. Very much appreciate their continued faithful support of our students.
Yes, thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed, any abstentions? Okay, motion carries. We can take 7.1 to 7.5 as a consent agenda. Do I have a motion to approve 7.1 to 7.5?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, do we have any comments or questions?
I'd just say Dr. Fitzgerald
Yes.
highlighted, I think
salary.
the salary reclassification. The one I would highlight in instructional is we all have interns at different times, and I just wanted to welcome Ms. Daisy Concepcion, who's here tonight, serving as
Welcome.
doing a little bit of an internship and doctoral program learning from us. So just welcome her to be
Yes.
with us, and her
Welcome.
approval is on the agenda tonight.
Okay. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, any abstentions? Okay, well, 8.1, do I have a motion to approve Schedule D?
So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Do we have new business, 9.1? No? Okay, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, have a good evening, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.